Hello, Lena. Welcome to Mr. Quakers Teaches. I'm Mr. Quakers. In this lesson, which has two parts, in the first part, I'll be speaking about what you're seeing on the screen, the theme, tone, and point of view of all the 15 poems in the GCSE or IGCSE Anthology. In the second part, I'll be speaking on the form and structure again of all 15 poems. Now, if you want to, just focus on the form and the structure, you can go to part 2 of this video. But then if you want to, find out the themes, the tone, not exhaustive of all the 15 poems, you can stick and stay. Now, additionally, I have a course where I've, analyzed all the 15 poems. It's just for £5 a month to subscribe, or you can buy the entire course for £45 a year. That's if you have a year to prepare for the exam. Now, additionally, I also provide tuition as well. So if you need help, with writing essays for the poetry, the prose, drama on your scene, again, you can just sign up at mrquakersteachers.com. Now, if you want to join our lessons, there's a free trial lesson. So you can just try the lesson. If you like it, then you can stick around. But if not, you can, without questions, you can, look for other options. Now, let's begin the analysis. Now, these are the poems, the 15 poems, the road, and then it ends with the bus, a song, boxes, the rest of them, all 15 of them. Now, let's look at the first poem, The Road by Nancy Fotheringham. In terms of the themes of the poem, we have a theme of, the love for and interaction with nature. That's the superimposing theme of the poem. Then we also have traveling as well, in terms of the literal sense, because the speaker is traveling, it's in a car and just traveling. In terms of the tone of the poem, we see the tone of pride. The speaker is also very arrogant as well, because he says, I made multiple times, this sense of pride and arrogance. But there's a sense as well that the speaker is happy. Those are in terms of the tone that we see, not exhaustive, but these are some of the tones that we see in the poem. In terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted in the first person point of view. Now, that's evidenced by the speaker's repetition of I in reference to himself. The person is referencing himself to himself, that I'm the one that is having this experience. And it's useful because we see directly from this persona's experience, traveling the night and, making all these boastful claims about the speed and quickness. Now, the second poem is The Instant of My Death by Sarah Jackson. In terms of the themes of the poem, the themes is religious pilgrimage and travel. So it has that same sense, like the road. But we also see the theme of the unpredictability of life. So life is unpredictable. And we see that as the speaker travels, has like this epiphanous experience. Then we also see other themes as life as a journey, the value of life, the power of experience, among other, themes. Now, in terms of the literal themes, the poem essentially is about this speaker who is in a bus, traveling in a bus, and the bus is overcrowded. That's like the literal theme that we see in the poem. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, the speaker comes across as someone that is complaining, is very irritated, bored, gossipy as well, because he's telling us about other passengers, the fat man, someone reading the Jakarta tale, and then the boy that the speaker sees. Then it is quite epiphanous, and we see that when we were told in the final stanza that there's the shot, and then it says, and a piece of me stopped then. So that sense, I know that the speaker gets like this epiphany or epiphanous experience. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem, the point is recounted with a blend of the first person, and we see that in the words like, my, that's pronounced like first person pronouns like my, I, me, right? Then we also see the use of the first person plural as well, because the speaker appears to be talking about the rest of the other passengers in the bus. So we see the use of we, us, and then the speaker also speaks directly to somebody who, in the first paragraph, who is, reading the Jakarta tales. So we see that in the reference to the person, as you. Then, we see the third person when it says he, his, in reference to the fat man and also the boy that, is seen in the gap-toothed boy that is seen, that hides in two cracks. Now, I do a very good explanation of the poem in my course, which, like I've mentioned already, is just £5 a month, and also £45 if you have like a year or at least a year or more, to prepare for the exam. Now, in terms of the themes of the next poem is the Bus by Arun Kolatkar. Kolatkar. The name always, always sort of rattles me a bit. But again, in this poem, we see the same sort of similar themes that we saw just in the instant of my death. So again, we see the theme of religious pilgrimage, observance, and enlightenment. Because this old gentleman who is traveling gets enlightenment at the end of the journey. He's transformed essentially. We see themes like religion as well. Travel in difficult situation. Again, the same kind of themes that we see in the instant of my death. This bus, in this instance, the bus, all the windows, the flaps are all closed. Again, finally, another theme that we also see is Epiphanos change, just like we saw in the road. In terms of the tone, the poem is quite gossipy because this speaker appears to be speaking directly to somebody in the second person, and is also revealing as well. And that ties to the point of view of the poem. So the poem is recounted with a second person point of view, and it's seen in the references to the persona as you and your. So your elbow, you look down, and things like that, and then also refers to them directly as as old man. So in terms of the point of view, it's recounted mainly in the second person point of view. Now the next poem is At the Bus Station by Julius, Chingono. Now this poem, in terms of the themes, even though it's in a bus, talking about the bus, it is not in the interior of the bus. It is what happens before the persona enters the bus. That's like the key driving force of the poem. It's has a lot of advice to this, city, someone that's going to the city for the first time, and what to expect, what to do, how to behave. So we see themes like rural urban migration. We see themes like urbanization, city life and its struggles. We see the effects of urban life on an individual's character and attitude, that urban living can change you. Then the necessity of wanton selfishness and greed in the city. Those are some of the themes that we see at the bus station. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, it's advising, so it's admonition. It's also prophetic as well, in the sense that it says this is what will happen to you. During the battle, you will hang in the air. There's this tone of certainty as well from the speaker. Like, it's sure that this exactly is what will happen to this rural dweller that's going to the urban area when they get there. And this is how they should, act or behave when they get there. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted mostly in the second person point of view. So you see the use of you and your in reference to the persona that is, traveling to the city. So when you arrive at the bus station, when they'll pull your tie, so this sense is like I'm advising you directly, possibly by somebody, who's traveled to the city before or lived in the city and has experienced it. So it's just, advising someone who's traveling there what to expect and how to behave when they get there. I do a fantastic analysis. Check it out in the course. I also have like a sample of it on YouTube as well. Now, the next poem is These Are the Times We Live In by Imtiaz, Dharker. Now, forgive me that the poem is a bit small. I just wanted the entirety of it to appear on the page so you see how it looks in terms of, the structure. Now, the themes of this poem are international migration, identity, and nationality. Then the stereotypical treatment of people at border entry points and changes in travel around the world. And I think this poem is post September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center was attacked, and how it changed things and how certain ethnic groups were sort of singled out in negative treatment, with the fear that they were terrorists. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, it's very narrative. It's very narrative. But then the speaker is quite displeased and irritated by the treatment that she thinks that this person on the border is receiving. But there's this sense of pride as well in the way she describes the person. She describes him as someone that is more than what is on the paper. He has like a heart, to help people, Then in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted mostly in the second person point of view, and is seen in the multiple references to the immigrant persona as you and your. So you hand over your passport. So it creates the impression that the speaker is speaking directly to him or to the person, she. I'm not certain about the gender of this persona, but speaking directly to them. Now there's also instances when the speaker refers to the border agent persona as he and his. So in reference to him. Now furthermore, she shows the widespread nature of the immigrant persona's ill treatment with we. So given the times we live in, so there's this sense that we are all together in it. All of humanity, all the countries, everyone, we all live in it. And that is what we also see in the title of the poem as well. Now finally, she uses they in reference to an unnamed group that changed the immigrant persona's identity while it was flying. So they scrubbed out your mouth, they made you over completely, they missed out your heart. So in reference to these, so there's this sort of like a cabal of sorts, that is trying to negatively portray this persona. So in terms of the point of view, those are what we see: the first person, the second person, and the third person, plural, and also the first person plural as well, we. Now the next poem is The Enemies by Elizabeth Jennings. Now, in terms of the themes of this poem, it's war and its effects. So war, the effects of war. Mistrust and suspicion among neighbors after an invasion. That's essentially what's happening in the poem. There's an invasion and everybody's unsure on how to communicate with their neighbors. The next theme is the effects of fear in the city. That's another theme as well, among other themes. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, it's quite gossipy. So this speaker is telling us that last night they came, hush hush kind of. Suspicious as well. The speaker is quite suspicious of the listener. Is trying to gauge, control, their way, the way they speak about the subject. Then we also see the tone of mistrust as well. So there's this mistrust that brews in the town. People no longer trust each other. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted in the third person point of view. So plural third person says they. So repetition of they and their. So their homes, reference to the invaders. So it signals that they are the main focus of the poem. Now, she also uses the first person point of view as well. Now, for example, when she refers to myself as myself and I am mine. So when revealing thoughts of individual townspeople, which creates the impression that she's reading their minds. So it's like she's able to get into the minds of the townspeople and tell us what they are thinking. Better hide myself. I used to walk in, my own house. So it's like, there's this sense that the speaker in the poem is omniscient, is able to read the thoughts of the townspeople. The next poem is Boxes by Sampurna, Chattarji. Now, in terms of the themes of this poem, crammed living in urban areas. So I think there's some sort of correlation, between urban areas and crammed living. The absence of nature in urban jungles, essentially, that's also another important theme. The prevalence of noise and air pollution in urban areas. So there's noise pollution, there's air pollution. Then overcrowding and poor quality of life in cities. Because this speaker is essentially living in a box. Then the worsening state of urban living, among other themes. But these are like the key themes that I saw in the poem. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, it's quite gossipy. Right, and there's this sense of pity as well. The speaker has like this pity for this persona who has to live through this. It's also very critical, of city living and city life. Then there's this sense of resignation, or there's this resign that there's nothing that can be done about the situation. And in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted with a blend of a third person. Now, this seen in the multiple references to the persona as her, she, and then his, because the persona actually has a husband living with her in this cramped space. Then we also see the use of the second person point of view as well, seen in the use of your. So fall in and kick off your shoes. There's this invitation that's speaking directly to the reader. It's like there's an invitation from the speaker that the reader should come. Fall in, it has like this military attitude or tone towards it. Kick off your shoes, more relaxed. So there's this, osmoronic nature of the poem, kind of, falling, military, kick off your shoes, relax. So it's like the speaker is unsure. Sorry, the reader is unsure of what exactly they are going to experience. Again, in the analysis, I do a very good job with that. Now, the next poem is The Capital by W.H. Auden. Now, this poem, in terms of the themes, we see the theme of debauchery. So, excessive enjoyment and sleeping around, unrestrained liberality of city life. Then we also see the theme of the excesses of urban areas versus the traditional nature of the rural areas. Then we also see the theme of dog-eat-dog or predator-prey nature of cities and the hidden negatives of city life. That's also another theme that we see. Then we see the theme of the unceasing temptations of urban living. You see that in the tail end of the poem where we're told that there's this glimmer of light that's glowing visibly into the dark countryside, sort of inviting the children of farmers to come to the rural areas where they can be debauched. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, the tone is quite critical, of city life and city living. In fact, the city is personified to show that it knows what it's doing, knows what it's about. It's also accusatory as well. It accuses the city of, trying to mess up the morals of rural dwellers. It's also quite rebuking as well. Again, my analysis, I do a good job with it. You can look at the sample, or alternatively, you can just buy the course and then you see how well it's done. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted mostly in the second person point of view. Now, this is evidenced by the speaker's repetition of you in reference to the personified capital. So the capital, which is the title, is personified. Then we also see the use of the plural first person as well in reference to the city dwellers. As the speaker chastises the capital for what it has done to him, another city dweller. So, you betray us to believe in our infinite powers. You told us that we could do everything we wanted. We could live life anyhow. But, the end, look at what we have to deal with. You deceived us, essentially. Now, the next poem is An Afternoon Nap by Atayap. Now, in terms of the themes of this poem, tiger parenting, that's like the key theme, because the mother is always on the child's case, trying to make sure that he excels. So, unhealthy push by parents for children to achieve great things. Now, we also see the theme of domestic abuse, because multiple times in the poem, the mother, physically abuses the child. Then we see generational dysfunction, because the child also becomes like his mother later on. Then we also see the cycle of abuse, and an unhealthy mother-son relationship, among, other themes. And in terms of the tone of the poem, it's quite gossipy, and it's gossipy because the speaker, or this poetic voice, is telling us about his neighbors. What they are doing. He's not a party to what's happening, but he can see them across the road. We see that in the first line of the first stanza, and also the first line of the final stanza. So across the road. So this neighbor is telling us, what is happening at this house opposite him, right? So the poem is recounted in the third person point of view, evidenced by the multiple references of the personas as mother and then the boy. And then we also see the use of her, him, his. So we see those adjectives as well, pronouns as well, that reveals to us that, the speaker is telling us about the mother and son. Okay. Now, the next poem is Plaits by Elizabeth Smither. Now, the themes of this poem include inequality, unity in strength, differences, and then justice for all. Those are some of the themes. So, inequality, one thick anaconda plate, and then one thin grass plate. But then unity, when they come together, differences, how we should celebrate differences, and then justice for all. Essentially, Smither uses plates as a metaphor for, how people have different strengths. In terms of the tone of the poem, it's proud, and sure. Like the speaker is certain about what she's about, or what she's speaking about. Now, the poem is recounted in the first person point of view, evidenced by the speaker's repetition of I and my, in reference to herself multiple times, which signals that she's recounting her own Well, experience to the reader. The next poem is Children of Wealth by Elizabeth Daryush. Now, this poem, in terms of the themes, is the sheltered lives and experiences of the wealthy. That essentially, and then social class, those are like the key themes of the poem. But then later on in the poem, when we look at the final stanza, the couplet, we see the unpredictability of life. You wake up to horrors wrecking fire. Your home is wired within for this in every room. So the life is unpredictable. Bad things can happen to you, even though you think you're living in this wonder world or utopia where everything is perfect. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem is quite direct. In terms of tone, lecturing as well. So it's lecturing or speaking directly to the children and telling them what to do. Get down, go out. It's also quite irritated. The speaker is irritated, and there's this dark sense because the poem ends with, the house of the children, being engulfed in fire, and they presumably maybe perishing or maybe losing their belongings. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted with a second person point of view. Now, this is seen in the use of the second person pronouns like you, your, and you, which signals that the speaker is strongly lecturing and then directing the children on what to go out and experience the world outside their perfect home. Go out, so speaking directly to them, and possibly maybe the reader as well, if they are living, those kind of lives that is fully detached from reality. Now, the next poem is Rich and Poor, or Saint and Sinner by Thomas Love Peacock. Now, in terms of the themes of this poem, the class system is one of the key things that we see. Just like we saw, in Children of Wealth, inequality in society, the unfair treatment of the poor when compared to the rich. So even though in Children of Wealth, we don't see any mention of the poor, here we see the clear, comparison. Again, forgive me that the poem is compact on the page, but I just wanted the whole thing to appear so that, students can see how it looks. Then we also see the magnification of the poor man's wrong versus the downplaying of the rich man's wrongs. So when the poor man does something, it is magnified. When the rich man does something wrong, it is, understated. Then we also see the theme of different strokes for different folks. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, it's shock, revealing, also irritation as well. The speaker is shocked. Why are you doing this? Why are you treating the poor people this way and the rich man, this way? Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted with a blend of the second person point of view. So we see that multiple times the speaker is trying to speak to the reader and show them that the rich man is spoken about this way. And then the poor man is treated this way. So it's like she's speaking to us. He's speaking to us. He wants us to know that this is how, even though he tells us about the individual lives of the rich and the poor, essentially the poem is speaking directly to the reader. Now, the next poem is A Long Journey by Musaemura, Zimunya. Now, in terms of the themes of the poem, we see rural-urban migration, which is a key theme because this speaker appears to have moved from its rural setting to urban area. Then we also see the theme of superstition as well. He's quite superstitious. He talks about witches and witchcraft and wizards. He talks about how he chases them, bones. History is also another key theme in this poem as well. Identity, primitive living, semi-modernity, and modernity. Those are some of the themes that that comes up. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted with a blend of the first person singular and plural points of view, as the speaker speaks about his personal. So he says, I, my, me. Then later on, he speaks about the collective experience of his fellow rural urban migrants, and then he refers to them collectively with himself, or including himself, as we. So there's this sense that when you go to the city, the experience that you have is quite, universal of sorts, or collective. Now, the next poem is Touch and Go by Stevie Smith. Now, in terms of the themes of the poem, The first theme I see is the mental and emotional condition of man, because it talks about man, coming out of the mountain, but he still is caught in the past. So there's this sense that man wants to come into modernity, but then his vestigial feature, which is his tail, again, I analyze it quite well, is caught. So he can't fully come out of primitive living into, modernity. Then we also see the theme of the brutality of the human condition, humanity's relationship with the divine, because it talks about God, the loneliness of man, and the unavailability of help for him in creation. Then we see the developmental stage of man, and the final vestiges of primitive living, among other themes. And in terms of the tone of the poem, it's quite gossipy. Yes, talks about it's insulting as well, pleading. It begs and says, so is there no one to help him? It's also emotional. There's this sense that there are multiple voices actually in the poem, because it appears that somebody is talking about man's state. God is also asking for help, for man. There's this sense of, irritation. So there's this topsy-turvy, or what I would describe as, like oscillation or change in the tone as the poem, unfolds. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted with a third-person point of view, evidenced by the speaker describing man's various states to her listener. So he, speaking directly about man, so that the reader hears man's states. The next poem is sung by Judge Szirtes. Now, in terms of the themes of this poem, we see fight for freedom. That's the key theme of the poem. Then we see the suppression of people and their fight to be liberated. We also see the theme of small actions by little people causing liberation, and then also class system and the subjugation of the powerless by the powerful. And that they fight. There's this sense that they want to fight and come out. In fact, the poem is dedicated to Helen Sazman, which is one of the key, apartheid. People fought against apartheid. Now, in terms of the tone of the poem, you see a call to action, act. It also has this morale building sense, like to build people's morale to fight. It's also encouraging as well. So that's a sense that their action should be taken. Now, in terms of the point of view of the poem is recounted in the second person point of view, evidenced by the speaker's repetition of you in reference to the listener. All you hear is like speaking to the listener that if there's any need for you to fight for your freedom. You ought to fight for it. So that is about the point of view. So it's in the second person point of view. Now, the second part of this lesson is on the structure and form of all the 15 poems. Again, these are the poems. And like I said, I have a course that has all 15 poems, detailed video analysis with sample A-star or grade 9 essays for some of the poems, and also IGCSE style questions to predicted questions to test you. If you have a proper understanding of the poem. Additionally, you can also sign up and join our lessons, our group sessions. By just signing up at mrquickesteaches.com. www.mrquickesteaches.com. Additionally, you can also, when you sign up, the first lesson is actually a trial lesson. It's a free trial lesson. You sign up and see if you like it, you join it. If you don't, it's fine. We just want to help at Mr. Quickest. We just want to help students excel in their exams. Now, the first poem in terms of the form and structure is The Road by Nancy Fotheringham Cato. Now, in terms of the rhyme, the poem has a rhyme scheme of A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, G H G H, I J I J. Now, you see that nicely on the page. The poem also has 20 lines in total, right? So it has 5 quatrains. So a quatrain essentially is a 4-line stanza. So it makes the poem appear very organized on the page. But in terms of the rhyme scheme of the poem, this form and structure is really important in the poem. You have to speak about it if you're looking to get either a grade 8 or a grade 9 or an A or an A-star. It's very, 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 I teach my students how to answer questions and then how to, present the structure because it's really, really useful as one of the points, if no matter the question you're asked. Now, the rhyme scheme gives the poem, like a personal praise song. He's written a song to praise herself. The speaker is praising her power and her influence, what she can do. Now, in terms of the poem as well, the structure, the poem also uses the poet also uses enjambment, and we see that in the flow of words from one line to the next without pause. So it communicates the ease of her travel and her unfettered influence and power to control everything. That is why I think Cato uses enjambment in the poem. Now, the next poem is The Instant of My Death by Sarah Jackson. And in terms of the form and structure of this poem, it's a 3-verse poem. Essentially, what it means is that the poem does not have a rhyme scheme. We also see the use of tacet stanza as well. So by tacet, I mean, 3-line stanzas. So if you observe, we have seen tacet stanzas, then we're going to see other kinds of stanzas as well. But the poem has like 14 lines in total. Now, the first and 6 lines are tacet or 3-line stanzas. So with a bit of indentation. So if you look at it, you can see that clearly. So the first with indentation in each of them. The first and then the last. Now, this is, we also see a sizable indentation as well in the last word of the second line. You see that, right? So there's an indentation. After a damp cut, then we see it's blank, and then into the third line. The other line, the second, the fourth, the fifth are couplets or 2-line stanzas. Now, the zigzag nature of the poem, as seen in the regular line and stanza length, may be the speaker's way of communicating the hecticness of the journey. So it was very hectic. It was a very, very, very difficult journey. So it's long and then it's short, and then so it's like, because they are climbing up to Spiti, which is like a mountain. So there's this sense that it's going up and coming down, and she uses the line and then the structure of the poem to present this. Now, the poem also has enjambment as well. So we see the flow of words from one line to the next without pause. I've spoken already about the indentation just a few minutes ago. Now, the next poem is The Buzz by Arun Kolatkar. In terms of the form and structure of the poem is a 3-verse poem. Again, this poem does not have a rhyme scheme. So it lacks a rhyme scheme. Then the poem has 22 lines in total, right? Which are broken into 4 tacet, or when I say tacet, 3-line stanzas. So stanzas 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all tacet stanzas. Then we also have like 4 couplet or 2-line stanzas as well. So that's stanzas 2, 3, and 8. And a monostitch, which is a 1-line stanza, that's stanza 9. So 1-line stanza. Now, we see again the use of enjambment and indentation, just like we saw in The Instant of My Death by Sarah Jackson. So we see the use of enjambment, indentation, and small letters. In fact, the entirety of the poem is written in small letters. So the poet employs enjambment multiple times in the poem, seen in the flow of words from one line to the next. So it mimics the journey and the persona achieving enlightenment. And then we also see indentation as well with the word tempo, which is intended to create suspense. So a sword of sunbeam comes to rest gently against the driver's right temple. That creates suspense. Then we also see the use of poetic license as well, which allows the poet to use small letters in the entire poem. The entire poem is written in small letters. Now, the next poem is At the Bus Station by Julius Chingono. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem, it's a 3-verse poem. Again, it has no rhyme scheme, right? So the poet uses this to communicate the topsy-turvy and unpredictability of city living. So there's no rhythm or rhyme to city living. Anything can happen at any time. You have to be, fight. The poem is 30 lines in total, which is presented in a single stanza. We makes the word appear very crammed together on the page. It's like very crammed together again, just like city living. Everything is together. The poet also employs enjambment. The poet uses the enjambment multiple times in the poem, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next without pause. So when you arrive at the bus station, pull down your so it flows. So it shows that it's like continuous action. The next poem is These Are the Times We Live In by Imtiaz Dharker. Now this poem again is also another free verse poem. So again, evidenced by the lack of rhyme scheme. So by now you're seeing that there are multiple poems in the anthology that is free verse. It's the first one that has a rhyme scheme, but then the rest of them up to this point are free verse poems, at least in the order in which I've presented them. Right? So it shows that which is the speaker's way of communicating the reckless treatment of the immigrant persona by the border agent and the unnamed authorities. The poem has 39 lines in total. So it's 39 lines, but it's broken into 11 line stanza. That's stanza 3. That's where we see the meat of the action. Then we also see 8 line stanza. That's stanza 5. A quintet. That's 5 line stanza. That's stanza 2. And then 4 facet or 3 line stanzas. So stanzas 1, 4, 6, and 8. Are facet stanzas. Then a couplet, which is stanza 7. And then a monostitch or a 1 line stanza, which is stanza 9. It rustles as it lands. So which reveals the multiple key details of the interactions between the personas. So the immigrant persona and then the border agent persona. The poet also uses enjambment as well. So the poet employs enjambment multiple times in the poem, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next, which shows the speaker's eagerness. So there's a sense of eagerness from the speaker to reveal the immigrant persona's experience to the reader or to everyone. The next poem is The Enemies by Elizabeth Jennings. Now this poem has a very weak ABA, BBA, and then ABA, BBA, which you see in stanzas 1 and 2. Right? So AB, ABBA, and then AB, ABBA in the stanzas 1 and 2. And then, so it shows the initial artificial piece that was there. But later on, it changes to ABA, BA, BBC. So that reveals that is all along what we've seen in it's artificial. I think the speaker uses, or the poet uses the structure there to show that there's this artificial sense of peace. And then there's an underlying mistrust. There's a slight switch, not only in the rhyme scheme, but also in the length of the lines there. So the poem has 20 lines in total, which is broken into 2 sextets or 6-line stanzas. So stanza 1 and stanza 2 are sextets. But then the final stanza or the first stanza is an octet or 8-line stanza. Now, stanza 3, which gives the poem an even on the appearance, because sextet or 6-line, and then 8 lines. So it appears quite uneven on the page. So the impression that I get is that it's the speaker's way of trying to give the reader a very coded message, like a Morse code of sorts. Then we also see the use of enjambment as well in the poem. So the flow of words from one line to the next without pause. Again, to show the speaker's earnestness, or longing to reveal what's happening in the city to the reader. The next poem is Boxes by Sampurna Chattarji. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem, again, this poem is a free verse poem, seen in the lack of rhyme scheme. The poem has 20 lines in total, broken into 4 quintet or 5-line stanzas. So it creates the impression that the speaker is trying to visibly create the upward growing city, because that's one of the things that we see. It says every day the city you see that in line 16, every day the city grows taller. So I think she presents the poem this way, and it's quite crammed. So the words are quite crammed together. Again, I think she does that to, mimic the very crammed situation or living condition that they have to, experience in the boxes. So it's crammed. Now, the poet also uses enjambment as well. And we see that multiple times in the poem, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next. So it shows our openness to reveal more details to the reader. So you see enjambment. Enjambment is one of the key, in terms of the structure of a poem, most instances, poets use enjambment. The next poem is The Capital by W.H. Auden. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem is a free verse poem and is evidenced by the lack of rhyme scheme. So, which mimics the lack of rhythm in the city. So, the city has no rhythm. The poem has 20 lines in total, broken into 5 quatrain of 4-line stanzas. So, each of the stanzas have 4 lines, which makes the poem seem crowded and high, like the high-rise buildings in the city, that tempts rural folks. You see that in the final stanza. But the sky you illuminate. Your glow is visible far into the dark countryside. So it has to be quite high to be able to be seen in great distances. And Hidden uses the structure here to present that to the reader. Again, this poem also sees the use of enjambment as well, flow of words from one line to the next without pause, which reveals the fluidity of the speaker's thoughts. Now, the next poem, An Afternoon Nap by Atayab, again, in terms of the form and structure of the poem, it's a free verse poem. The poem does not have a rhyme scheme. Right? There's a sense in certain instances where there's this blend, but it doesn't match beautifully or nicely. Okay. Now, in terms of the structure of the poem has 21 lines. So the poem entirety of it is in 21 lines. That tells us that there's one of the stanzas that has more than five lines. Yeah, that's the fourth stanza. Pocket money, little pocket money. Now, 4 of the stanzas are quatrain of 4 lines. Why stanza 4 is a quintet of 5-line stanza. The use of enjambment is also seen here as well. So the poet employs enjambment multiple times in the poem, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next without pause, which shows the fluidity of the speaker's thoughts. Now, the next thing that we see in the poem is the use of all small letters because of poetic license by the poet. So all small letters through the poem. So it creates a sense of informality. It's informal, from the beginning of the poem. So the beginning of the poem, small letters, stanzas, beginning of stanzas, small letters, sentences, small letters, names of the week, small letters. I think the speaker is doing this as an act of solidarity against tiger mothers or the boy's mother, that sense. Also, misuse of digits like second, two, abbreviations like, up the upper sound and then $90 to reiterate his abandonment of the conventions of the English language. So the speaker, the speaker does not want to obey the rules of conventional English, and so uses poetic license to present this. Now the next poem is Plaits by Elizabeth Smith. In terms of the form and structure of this poem, again, this poem is a free verse poem, evidenced by the lack of rhyme scheme. So it's the speaker's way of communicating that people should live freely and help everyone. So there's a sense of freedom that is revealed in the lack of rhyme scheme. The poem has 15 lines in total, but is broken into 5 tacet 3-line stanzas. The tacet stanza may be an allusion to the saying, a 3-foot cord is not easily broken. There's this saying, like a 3-foot cord is not easily broken. There's this sense that if there's 1, 2, and 3, and then it's tied together, you can't easily break it. The next thing we see about the poem is the use of enjambment. The poet also employs enjambment multiple times in the poem, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next line and stanza without pause. So look at it there. The first stanza we see I had 2 plates, one thick and a corner plate, so it's flowing. But observe that the second stanza does not have a full stop. A rich waterfall and a thin trickling river, so again you see it flows. So there's this flow of words from the second stanza into the third stanza. Then we also see again the same thing from the fourth stanza, a wide and thin muscle. Then it flows into the final stanza or the first stanza less. So there's this flow of words from stanza to stanza. So this freedom, with which Smitha presents what can be achieved if people, the strong and the weak come together in unity. Now, the next poem is Children of Wealth by Elizabeth Daryush. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem is a sonnet. Okay, that means it has 14 lines, but then it's broken down. And you see the rhyme scheme there, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G rhyme scheme. But then it's broken into an octet or an 8-line stanza, a quatrain, a 4-line stanza, which is the second stanza, and then a 2-line stanza or rhyming couplet. So I think she uses this there as sort of like an angry cry. She uses the rhyme scheme there to present an angry cry on how some people have like this everything that they have in the world that makes them lose sight of the realities of living in the real world, essentially. Again, we also see the use of enjambment as well. See the multiple times, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next, and from the second to the third stanza. Observe that the second stanza does not have a full stop. So it shows the fluidity of the speaker's words as she lectures the children of wealth. The next poem is Rich and Poor, Saint and Sinner by Thomas Love Peacock. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem has an AA, BBA rhyme scheme. That's in stanza 1. So glaring, warning, fact, act, morning. But then stanzas 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 have an ABCB, ABCCB rhyme scheme. So the beauty of this rhyme scheme is that it makes the poem, gives the poem musicality and makes it easier for the reader to memorize. Now, and again, forgive me for mentioning the poem, I'm making it small on the page, but the poem has 40 lines in total. So it's broken into 8 quintet or 5-line stanzas, which creates the impression that the speaker wants to make a long list of what he considers the many unfair treatments of the poor, while mostly turning a blind eye to the same from the rich. So it's quite lengthy, multiple things. So it talks about religion, it talks about food, it talks about drinking, it talks about entertainment, it talks about multiple things, travel, boating. Again, I do a very excellent job in my analysis. Now, we'll again see the use of enjambment as well. The poet employs the enjambment multiple times in the poem, seen in the flow of words from one line to the next, which shows an openness to reveal more details to the reader. The next poem is A Long Journey by Musaemura, Zimunya. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem, it's a 3-verse poem. And that's seen in the lack of rhyme scheme. So the poet, essentially breaks the poem into 7 stanzas. Now, this is quite useful because it tells us that we see the couplet there, right? So it's 30 lines in total, 7 stanzas of varying lengths. So we see the use of the couplet or 2-line stanza, that's in stanza 4. Right? Two-line stanza, that's in stanza 4. Right? Then we also see use of tacet as well, that's a 3-line stanza. That's stanza 3 and stanza 7. Then we see a quatrain as well, a 4-line stanza, that's stanzas 1 and stanza 2. And then see a quintet, that's 5-line stanza, that's stanza 6. Then we see a nonet, that's a 9-line stanza, that's in stanza 5. So you see the poem has stanzas of varying lengths. The poet also employs enjambment as well. So he employs enjambment multiple times in the poem, seeing the flow of words from one line to the next and stanza to stanza without full stop. In fact, from the first stanza, there's no full stop until the last stanza. So I think that just sense that, it's trying to mimic the long journey that the speaker takes and shows that there's a continuity. There's no pause between rural living and urban reason. It's one long joined experience. The next poem is is Touch and Go by Stevie Smith. Now, in terms of the form and structure of this poem has an A, B, C, B, D, E, F, E, G, H, I, H sort of rhyme scheme. So it's like there's this rhyme between the second and then the fourth line, the second and the fourth line, the second and the fourth line, all through the poem. So it gives it musicality and makes it easier for the reader to memorize. Now, the poem has 28 lines in total, broken into 7 quatrain or 4-line stanzas, which allows the speaker to give a very detailed description of man's developmental state as he moves from primitive living to enlightenment. Again, we see the use of enjambment as well in the poem. The poet employs enjambment multiple times in singing the flow of words from one line to the next, which shows an openness to reveal more details about man's state to the listener. The final poem is George Szirtes' Song. Now, this poem has an AAA, that's quadruple of 4 A's, and then BC, BC, D D E F E F G G H I H I J J rhyme scheme. So that's how it is presented, right? So we see that. So it gives the poem musicality. Then we also see the repetition again of the another sort of rhyme scheme, A B A K K, and then A again. Another 4 is because the first stanza is repeated again as the final stanza, essentially for the most part, except that there's full stop, and then there's the removal of till in the first stanza, and then replaced with then. So it gives the poem musicality and mimics the age-old song that of freedom, that we are told. It says this is what has been sung by people all over time. So it's like a song of freedom that has inspired other freedom fighters to fight for freedom. So it's a song, a call to arms. Now the poem has a one-line dedication, which is for Ellen Sussman, and then we see that the entirety of the poem is 32 lines in total, broken into two quatrain or 4-line stanzas. So that's stanza 1 and stanza 6, right? So see, stanza 1, nothing happens, and then stanza 6, that's the final stanza, right? And then we also see 4 sestet or 6-line stanzas. So that's stanzas 2, 3, 4, 5. So it makes the poem appear long and unending, like the fight for freedom that never ends. So constantly, from generation to generation, people have to fight for freedom. Then we also see the use of enjambment again in the poem, in this poem as well, multiple times, seen in the flow of words from one line to the next without pause, in all the stanzas, to show how the fight for freedom has taken place over multiple generations again and is unceasing. So there you have it, the final poem in the analysis. Like I said, this is part of a detailed course that you can subscribe to for just £5 a month, or you can buy the entirety of it for £45 for a year. Additionally, we provide tuition on all components of the GCSE or IGCSE, prose, poetry, drama, and even on scene as well. We also provide tuition as well for other of the GCSE or IGCSE subjects, English, geography, history, sociology, math, and the sciences. So thank you so much for joining this lesson. I hope you found it very helpful. Share it and subscribe. On to the next lesson. I'm Mr. Quickest. From me, bye-bye.